So we're broadcasting now live. Welcome all to the second O2h ChaiTime Webinar. We're delighted to invite you all from around the world. You're an amazing panel, and I'm really excited to be talking to you all about Innovate from your sofa. What I'm going to be doing today is we're going to ask you to introduce yourselves briefly, and then give us a little observation from the lockdown. But before I do all that, the vibe of this thing is a little lighter than a normal kind of webinar. And my brother last week did it with a beer in his hand. I'm more of a coconut water person myself, and I have the proof that it is an authentic from a coconut.
Wow.
And, yes, and so we've got people tuning in from the East Coast, France, London, and of course India. So I think given the time of this, I think in the East Coast they'll be on their second or third coffee probably by now, would you say, Karin? And Chris, you're probably on a late afternoon bottle of wine.
Yeah, a nice Bordeaux. It's very nice.
And lekha, you probably warmed up with a garam masala cutting chai, or is it something?
Honestly, I have nothing but a cat to keep me warm right now. So.
And Chris, the Brits.
And the pleasure of your company.
Chris, the Brits are usually drinking from lunchtime, so I don't know what you're.
I should have brought my coffee into my office.
Right. Good. So I'm Prashant. I'm the chairman of O2h Group, and also a partner in the Human Health Fund, which is an early stage EIS fund based out of Cambridge. And my observation from the lockdown is I tried to, I'm endeavoring to grow a beard, and my friends think I look like Robinson Crusoe. My mother thinks I look like Narendra Modi, and my niece thought I looked like Santa Claus and asked for some early Christmas presents. So that's me. Lekha, over to you first to introduce yourself.
Oh gosh. My name is Lekha Washington. I've spent a decade being a South Indian actress. I run a company that innovates, that makes things, the ideas in my head. So design, somewhere between design and art, and I make very large scale art installations. Right now I'm writing a lot of poetry, but that's me.
Thank you. And your observation?
My observation, well, is that I have been living absolutely by myself for the last month and a half. And I'm a little
apart from your cat?
I'm a little bit bored of my own company, and therefore I'm excited to have a conversation with other human beings.
Very good. Chris.
Yeah, hi, my name is Chris Heron, and I'm the CEO of Visibly. And we're an employee engagement and communication tool, and we built Visibly specifically to support organizations as they shift their workforce from the office to home-based. So obviously the timing for us is good in some ways, but obviously not great in others. My observation about the lockdown is that it's given a lot of people time to breathe. They're not rushing to their workplace. They're not rushing to take their children to school. And so I'm finding a lot of people I'm talking to are reflecting on their lives, their work, and what's important to them. And I don't think that's wholly a bad thing either.
Caught me mid-chocolate.
I can carry on talking.
Karin, introduce yourself and your observation, please.
Yeah, and first of all, Prashant, thank you, and Sunil and O2h for hosting this meeting and for the invitation to participate today. And also my best wishes for well-being to the global community. I'm a scientist and chemist foremost who's passionate about chemical sciences to advance medicines. And I have the privilege to be the global head of Discovery Chemistry at Novartis, a pharmaceutical company who tries to really bring first-in-class medicines where there is not yet any solution to the patient. Luckily, I think about the lockdown, it's not, it's only physical, if you will, and my mind is going colder and wonders ever. I have to replace my commute that I have so nicely where I can walk to work in Cambridge, US, to going from one room to the other. And so I let my mind wander a lot, and make sure that that part cannot be inhibited, and it seems that works very well. But I have to say, looking out of the window and seeing those kids on the trampoline, doesn't matter if there's sunshine or rain, that makes me sometimes jealous. And perhaps one evening I will venture over there when it's empty to see how good I am at trampolining.
Well, you should join them, I think. I think Sunil regularly trampolines with his kids in the garden. So, yeah. Christoph.
Okay, hello everybody. Thanks for inviting me to this. It looks like it's going to be great fun. So I'm a professor. I'm a professor of technology management and also the dean of the Judge Business School. That's the business school of the University of Cambridge, UK. So as a business school, we are at the moment managing revenue challenges ourselves, as other companies are doing. We are in lockdown, as everybody else also is, but we're also trying to help companies to cope. For example, we have an SME growth program where we help SMEs to find ways of growing. Yes, many SMEs are still growing even today. We also have an SME resilience program that we will start in June. So we're trying to help the community. Now, my observation, you know, Chris, you said you have actually a positive observation about being at home. For me, it's a bit different. I am in video calls with people all day long, every day, and it's still hard to know what's going on when I only see a few people online. So yes, I see their facial expressions, but I only see those people. I can't walk through the building and get a feeling for the vibes. You know, I'm reduced to only getting an impression from the few people I actually talk with. And even in my town halls, which I do every week, it's hard to read the temperature. And so I feel constantly wondering, do I still understand really what's going on in my organization, you know, in addition to what people are telling me explicitly. So I find it hard.
Okay, so Christoph is missing the vibes. And before we kind of get stuck into the first question, I just want to, I don't know if any of you have watched any Indian TV debates on their current affairs, but they're literally all screaming over each other, talking on top of each other. And I don't think we want to go to that extreme, but as I'm in India, I think I'm going to throw away some of the, put aside some of the kind of very British etiquette, and before we politely listen to
may I
each other.
interrupt you here, please?
No, we're all very polite individuals. What do you think?
I think you're getting the idea, but we want us to be a debate. You know, we want to kind of jump in on each other where we disagree. You know, so we want a little bit of banter and disagreement and a little bit of electricity, if you will. So I'm going to jump into the first question and say, give me an example, if you can, of something creative or innovative that you've been involved in, so we can get to know a little bit about your work through that and a little bit about you as well. So Lekha, something that you've done that's creative or innovative that you're proud of.
I mean, most of the stuff that I do is relatively creative. I'm sitting on a chair that I made. Would you like to see it?
We would.
Wait. This is the dot chair, and it's circular and round, and then you sit on it. And it goes flat, so maybe that's an example. Also, you and me, Prashant, have been to an insane festival called Burning Man, where I did an art installation, which was a moon that rotated in the sky, and it went through the faces. People confused it with the actual moon. So there was quite a lot of sort of confusion with that. And I think pretty much everything that I do centers around trying to take things to the next step. So
thank you for that. And I just want to say that if you've ever been to the Arizona desert and looked into the sky and seen 2 moons, and you are genuinely confused that there's 2 moons in the sky. That shows you what an incredible artist Lekha is, to be able to kind of recreate the moon and to confuse almost several tens of thousands of people. Thank you for that, Lekha. Karin, I think something that you've done that you participated in, that you're happy that you did.
You know, we had to totally redesign our work with the new constraints. Also, all work that can be done from home is being done from home, and really minimally getting experimental work done in the context of what is the high priority work. So we have redesigned workflows, automated workflows, bringing in digital design, having a much more focus on critical paths. And this is not by dictating how to do that, but by really teams globally interacting with each other and having much more iterative research going on. And what is beautiful is how we can show that this is not slowing down the work, but actually enhancing the work we are doing. I think the globality, teams have always said to me, when you come to our side, we can talk about this and this. This is totally gone. We are now interacting wherever people are to get the work done. But the more automated workflows, more digital workflows, and more rigorous data analysis, those are real opportunities, which I believe are for the future.
As you are kind of head of research at Novartis, is there something that you've done that has come through, that you've invented, that is out in the market, that's something that has given you a lot of pride?
Yeah, just to be clear, I'm head of discovery chemistry at Novartis. I'm reporting to the head of research at Novartis. The workflows we are having, this is taking many years to get medicines to the market, but we are advancing projects to clinical investigation. And right now, very quickly, we have put together projects to take reposition compounds for COVID-19. And it's really beautiful to see how the world community has come together. We are analyzing, working together with global consortia to how we evaluate those compounds. And that has come together extremely fast over the last few weeks. And I'm really proud of the world putting everything aside, which company you're at, which organization you're at, and really pulling together to find a solution. And it has made the world very small. We are all in it together.
Thank you, Karin. And Christoph, something you've been involved in.
Okay, let me start by coming back to something that Lekha said. I liked your demonstration of your creativity. It's very nice. But creativity and innovation are not quite the same thing. They have something to do with each other. But innovation actually has something to do with something being implemented in a way that actually influences many people and changes the way they're doing things. That requires sometimes a lot of mundane work in order to actually get from a creative idea to something that really has an impact on people. I think it's important to distinguish that. So when you look at the business school, we are doing innovation work all the time. Specifically, we have research centers who are coming up with new stuff that really makes a difference. So for example, we have a health center, and that is helping GP practices, across the entire area here in order to widen the set of services. So they are more than, and now let me just, say something that maybe some other people say critically, even though I would never say it myself, from just being cost-cutting gatekeepers, to actually institutions that really help the NHS, to do things which don't require a hospital stay in a better way, which has a lot to do with changing the way they work and doing new things. And we have another center which is called a Center for alternative finance. They have developed a new way to make financial regulations machine readable. That sounds boring, right? So financial regulations, which is legal restrictions on what financial institutions can do. And every country does them differently. And they're all legal texts that nobody understands. So nobody really understands how it compares across different countries. So now there is this way which makes this machine readable. So you now can do benchmarking without thousands of people, poring over texts. So you can do cross-learning. You can have the countries learn from each other. You can have companies who understand how their requirements really differ depending where they go. This is going to revolutionize the way regulation is done. This has now gotten the support from DFID, from the Bank for International Development. And there is now a large organization, arising there, which we will spin out, that is really changing the effectiveness of financial regulations, for the good of everybody. And, I have several more examples, but this is the kind of stuff of ideas about how business is done, which are really making an impact, on the outside world.
Thank you, Christoph. Chris, something you've been involved in that it gives you a lot of joy?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's something that's probably impacted the world in such a big way as what Christoph is mentioning, but it impacted my world. So for me, it's quite important, which was really how I fell into technology in the first place. I used to run a search and selection, a recruitment consultancy, and I was living in France at the time, where I live now, funny enough. But my clients were all UK based, and this was in 2002, and I couldn't work out how we could get over this this problem of distance to enable my clients to see my candidates. And so the way that I managed to overcome it was to innovate around using video. So I was using an old camcorder, videoing my candidates and then uploading it through the back end of the website by FTP to the front end of my website so that my clients could then see the videos. Now, this was before YouTube was invented. This was before Facebook. None of these social media platforms were even existed. And what I later found out was that this idea was taken on by somebody else, and then automated video interviewing was created, which is now used universally globally. And actually now, as you can imagine, it's being used more than ever because of COVID-19. Everybody's using this technology.
You should have stuck with it. You should have stuck with it, Chris.
I know. I never commercialized it, and I regret it, but You
dropped the idea too soon. You should have stuck with it.
Story of my life.
Well, first big question to Christoph. Now, I'm kind of a broader question on innovation. Christoph, and this is one of your research themes, I understand, and this is a question I'm always wrestling with day to day in terms of how I'm trying to design an innovation culture in our own company. Is innovation something that is structured, processed, organized, where you define all the elements of the culture of innovation? Can you effectively create a recipe out of it, stick it in an article and teach people? Or is it something with mad, crazy people like Lekha?
There's definitely a no on that.
Some bit of individual genius and haphazardness and chaos, and then out of that you get a creativity or innovation, if you will. What are your thoughts on that?
So it's a little bit of both, and now, of course, you said, you look at this scientifically, so you are now expecting some boring, description maybe. Now you can describe it, and it's not mysterious. When we talked about this beforehand, you said you used the word mysterious. It's not mysterious. I think the key insight, as a senior manager, if you want innovation to happen in an organization, you need to realize that innovation requires search, right? Innovation means you're doing something where you don't already know how to do it, right? Or not, you don't know yet what exactly to do. That means you need to search around on a landscape, quote unquote, of different solutions where you don't know yet what's actually going to work and what's going to happen, okay? Now, that means, innovation is not completely unconstrained chaos. If you allow chaos, you're going to get chaos. You need to have a general direction of, what you want to achieve in a general market, technologies where you have competences. You need to have some type of an idea what you want to achieve. For example, therapies, what kind of indications, in pharmaceuticals, Karin, right? But then you need to let go. because you don't know yet what's going to work. Especially you as a senior manager, you don't know. Maybe some other people know, or maybe different people know different pieces of it. So you need diversity of ideas, and that's where you need the crazy people like Lekha, right? You need people with ideas, people who are able to break out of the perceived wisdom, you know, on the people who think they know everything, you know, the old farts, right? You need to try them out. You need to allow many ideas. You need to cut them off early, the ones that clearly don't work. You need to experiment. You need to allow that these things pivot, you know, that they change over time. Ideas never work in the way that they're first produced. And when you look at this, this looks messy. Whereas most managers, what they really want is tidiness and control, right? And this is not tidiness and control. This looks chaotic because you have all of that stuff running around where you can't predict what it's going to be, and where you need to cut things off. But it's still a process environment, and it's not unconstrained, and it's not undirected. But because it looks messy, because you have to let go, many managers feel uncomfortable about it, because it has fits and starts and failures, and you can punish the people for failures because you don't know before, you know, where the failure is going to be. But it's not mysterious, and it's not chaos, and it is directed. You just need to be more generous and more tolerant that you don't know everything and you don't have control.
I want to take from what you were saying. Yeah, can I? You were talking about failures, and I feel like the crux of innovation is that you don't judge yourself. That you're really clear about not judging an idea when it comes up. So when you're talking about it being a process, of course there's a process. Of course there's a clarity of what you're trying to achieve in the end. So it's not absolute chaos, but the lack of judgment is critical, is key. It's like you can't judge yourself before you get to the end goal. And I feel like that's really important in any form of creativity. You were talking about creativity and innovation, right? So I feel like creativity is the sort of raw putty that you can apply to various different things, and innovation is what you do with it, is the step forward.
Very good.
And can be applied to anything, a chair, chemical, just, you know, whatever. So, and I feel like lack of or withholding judgment, taking a moment to see where it goes is really important.
So, Lekha, but do you believe, I mean, is your artistic, do artists generally have a kind of a wild process in terms of, fine, you absolve yourself of judgment, but what's the process look like? Is it as wild and as haphazard as it might look, or is there a solid discipline and a process to how you go about things?
I don't think, I can speak for myself. I feel like different artists have different processes. For me, it's very clear. It's about an idea, and I see the idea about 100 times in my own head, and I know exactly what I want my end goal to be. I know, for example, if you're saying I want a cure for a disease, then you have an end goal that's really clear, and then the process is trying 20 different ways to get there. And you always sort of reach a wall at some point, and you try to find ways around the wall, and you spend some degree of energy innovating around that. But for me, the end goal or the outcome is incredibly clear to begin with.
Okay, and that is an example. Science and art, I think, you know, and that creative process, because I couldn't agree more than what Christoph said. Like, overall, I would say it might look to many as chaos and haphazard, and there are certainly more than one ways to be creative, and especially to create innovation, but to create an environment that innovates over and over again, not one time. It takes a balance, and I think sometimes that's the most difficult, the balance of a strong vision, and that's what you were just talking to too, like about, you have that vision, and it takes courage. It takes courage not to over-control the process, how to actually give that to the scientists, give that freedom to the scientists to shape their projects. It also takes a mix of talents, diverse talents. Also very difficult to sometimes not to, oh, everybody has to look the same way. No, that's actually the challenge, but the important part too. It takes a mix of diverse talent. Not everybody appreciates necessarily the same point of view, and that can be difficult, but looking at the same problem from different angles helps us to better characterize, reframe the question, and eventually leads to powerful solutions. It's a really important process. From outside, it might look messy. I also feel often for leaders becoming good leaders, being able to deal with what one could call a meta-stable solution or situation where it's like giving that strong vision, what are we going after, but the how and the process, not controlling that, letting your scientists go.
I have an example of a musician, of what the process that person used, if you want to hear it.
Yeah, please.
Along with what Lekha said.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I had 20 years ago the privilege of having a long conversation with a prize-winning guitarist, and he told me how he creates new songs. Right? I asked him, and so he takes out this beat-up notebook out of his pocket. Right? He takes this out and he says, every day, whenever I see something that creates an idea, I write it down in my notebook. At the end of the day, at the end of my 10-hour day, I have 15 ideas that are written down in my notebook. And then when other people think I smoke pot at home, what I do is I go through the ideas, and then 10 hours later already I strike out 11 of the 15. And then I take the other 4, and then I think about them more. I strike out 2 more, but then I have 3 others that I generated. Then at the end of the week, I have 20 ideas that have survived that process. I look at them more. I eliminate more. At the end of the month, I have 3 ideas which are still alive. And that's when I take my guitar in my hand and I'll start playing guitar. And then once every 3 months, one of those ideas makes into a song.
Fantastic.
That's a process. You see, this is a process. And it's a process of creativity, constant rechange, exactly like what you said, right? In the end, to get to something that actually works. It's a process, but it's a process where you need to have tolerance for unpredictability and messiness in order to have the courage to do it.
Like this debate so far. Brilliant. Okay, so we've kind of touched on the paradox of control and having those eureka and those spaces around giving people to create. I'd just like to come back to Karin now, actually, and ask you, do you think the circumstances we find ourselves in the world right now during the lockdown is making us more creative or less creative or less innovative?
I think it is mixed, but
I'm happy he asked you that question, Karin.
Huh?
I'm happy he asked you that question.
I'm sure you will get a chance, Christoph. I think it's mixed, but a lot of positives. Some people, actually, what I see and what I'm excited about is some people find now their voices who struggled before. Some of it introverts who communicate ideas now in chat boxes and some of our digital tools we have. But before, when we were in a room, somehow, didn't bring their voice in. And so I really see there a democratization, if you will, I hope I'm not butchering the language here, of research, of ideas. And we have global meetings where we are working meetings on projects. And I see in chat box people having the strongest voice with ideas who would never say something in a room. So I see really an opportunity here that it's not like the hierarchy in a room. It's really much more coming together and people follow up, ask questions, look at from different angles. So I do think there is that is really what has been possible through this. And I do believe this is a fantastic result that will not go away. We will be learning to bring through these tools to bring other voices in. On the other hand, we also need to, I definitely need to acknowledge that while I'm very impressed with the creativity and the resilience people have brought and what we are seeing, at the same time, there is an additional stress that inhibits some people with some anxiety. And I also believe that it's important to see how we can bring those back in. And so I would like to think that world after COVID will not be exactly as before COVID. We will learn, we will have turned adversity in a lot of opportunity, and we'll have learned actually to bring in more people in the creative steps. But at the same time, I also think a little bit less stress for people, seeing that light in the tunnel will help too.
Does anybody else think the circumstances are making them, or us, organizations, more or less creative? Does somebody want to offer another thought? If not, I'll roll on.
I just wanted to step into something that Karin said, actually, which I thought was quite interesting, around people feeling freer to give their honest point of view and communicating better than they did before digitally, which I think is really interesting. And there's an American organizational psychologist who's done a lot of work around this, researched around putting people in virtual reality headsets and seeing how they communicate differently when people don't know who they are. And some of the outputs are really interesting, that, you know, people just do become a bit more, you know, a bit like keyboard warriors, you know, they care less about what people think about them when they're digitalized. So I think that's maybe what we're seeing, actually.
Do you, my next question to you, Chris, was, I mean, you work in Visibly, and you kind of work on trying to create and build culture in companies. And I think it's particularly apt, you know, at this moment where people are working from home. I mean, what are you seeing at the moment? What technologies, how can technology help us kind of build culture when we can't have the buzz of being in the same room as Christoph was talking about earlier?
Yeah, well, it's a good question. I think, you know, I mean, right now, obviously, these technologies are absolutely crucial. I mean, they're helping us continue what we were doing in the workplace. So without them, we would be in a very dark place. So that's the first thing I'd want to say. And I'd also say that, you know, obviously, you know, culture is quite a complex subject. It's quite difficult to explain. And, you know, communications is just one part of culture, but there's a lot of other facets to culture that are important that we digitalize. And what we also have to be very careful of the fact is that, you know, the modern workforce is increasingly mobile, it's collaborative, but it's also multi-generational as well. And not all generations want to jump onto a video app or onto a chat app. Not everybody feels comfortable communicating in that way. And so organizations have got to be very careful about the way that they engage their people in a way that they want to be engaged, and in a format that they feel comfortable with. So that's something that we've been really focusing on the last couple of years, is really thinking about the different types of people you have in an organization and the types of tools that are going to work with those different types of people. You know, so we've created things like magazines that are containing employee-generated content, and that could be sent out to employees to their home. So people that aren't technology-led can actually read magazines in their own home and still enjoy the buzz of the workplace and what's going on. So that's one thing. But I think there's other things like, you know, we need to make sure that we give people a voice, and that doesn't creativity.
Your voice just went there, Chris, but it's okay. I think we, you're back.
The last couple of
technology just.
Yeah, no, you're frozen. So I'm gonna roll.
Oh.
It's all right. I think
now you're back.
You're back, but I think we got.
Well, I just say one.
One more.
You missed your window. You missed your window.
I know, great. But I would just say that, you know, as face-to-face interaction disappears, it's really imperative that our people have somewhere to celebrate their wins and their special moments. And, you know, that's where we focus, is, you know, helping people share happiness, share the way they're feeling, because it's feelings and moments that actually make culture.
Thank you.
If I may add one thing, I agree to everything Chris said. One thing that we are trying to emphasize, you know, within my organization is we are trying to encourage people to be helpful to each other, you know, so the whole thing doesn't turn into something winner and loser. I mean, Chris, you said that in a way, right? I agree to everything you said, and that's kind of where we're trying to put an emphasis, which is consistent with what you said.
Great, thank you.
And actually that positiveness, I've seen so much where people are supporting of each other, looking out for each other, bringing each other in differently. And the diversity of tools Chris has mentioned, I think that's so important. You know, sometimes I feel, okay, here, perhaps I just have to call somebody up now and, you know, have a normal, if you will, one-on-one versus some more, global meetings.
Lekha, you wanted to say something.
I just feel like empathy at this point is critical and key. And the one thing that I miss is hugs. And so I want to know how you translate that, because quite frankly,
Very good point.
There's a high degree of screen fatigue, and I feel like that it's imperative and necessary to build empathy into an organization at this point, and build real communication and authenticity and a genuine sort of, because there is a abject lack of it in the immediate present, being locked down.
Yeah, in the corporate world, they're changing the CEO title to Chief Empathy Officer rather than Chief Executive Officer, which I think is probably quite apt. Actually, not bad, I think. Not bad.
I've always felt I was 1/3 kind of psychologist and counselor in my role of running O2H anyway. But yeah, I think that's absolutely right, Chris. And I love how self-moderating this discussion is, by the way. So, in the top right-hand corner here. Carry on, Lekha.
No, I just want to add, with this thing that we did with Burning Man, Prashant, what I found really interesting was with all of the corporate emails that we sent to each other, formality was out the window, and I was exchanging mail, and it was, I mean, a significant amount of money. There was quite a big bit on the line, extreme hard work, etc. But the moment corporate speak went out the window and we were saying exactly what we felt, it made a huge difference. And I mean, if I were to hope for some things to come out of this, the ability to communicate authentically would be way up on the list.
So I've got a couple of comments that are being fired in at me on the webinar chat, and James Digby is telling me is that he's noticed the conversations are much more honest and open than they used to be before. In terms of hugging people, there's now a technology apparently which allows you to robotically hug. So that's just popped up on my screen.
On its way to your home tomorrow, Lekha.
I've just got another question for you, Chris. When people talk about innovation or governments, or when we academically and intellectually kind of think about innovation, people always talk about it in terms of clusters and communities and networks and the concentrating skills, people and funding and entrepreneurs in a certain space. Do you think the paradigm has shifted somewhat, or do you think we'll go back to the way it was before in terms of how innovation is thought about in terms of clusters?
Is that Christoph or Chris?
Christoph.
Ah.
This one goes to the Dean of the Judge Business School.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, he's probably...
It's a good question. I think in the end, I think networks will simply continue to play a key role. You know, we are a human, we humans are social animals. I think without networks, you know, you're cutting off diversity. And so I think, you know, clusters and networks will just continue to play a role in enabling innovation dynamics. You know, even online, you know, we go back to mingling and exchanging. You know, I mean, in our Master of Entrepreneurship, our students have actually figured out how to do online socializing, you know, and clink glasses and, you know, and party and, you know, and exchange ideas. But I don't think it will fully replace face-to-face contact. It will complement it. So I wouldn't say we will go back to what we had before. I think this can play, you know, an additional role to make it a bit more flexible, to bring in some people who can't be here today. But ultimately, you know, as social animals, Lekha, you said earlier, right? You know, the online hug. Well, you know, it's not the same thing. And I think that for idea exchange, it's the same thing. It can help, but it's not going to replace it. I don't think.
Do you think the world will trauma bond over this?
The world will what?
Trauma bond. Since we're all going through a collective trauma.
No, I unfortunately, I don't think so. I mean, just look at what happened. I think, you know, when you look at the dynamics across countries right now, we're going the other way. So I think, unfortunately, I think I would like that to be right, but unfortunately, I don't think it is.
All right, I've got another question for you, Lekha, which is, as you're based out of India and I split my time between India and the UK, you'll understand the concept of deadlines and pressure and how incredibly, I'm baffled by it, how under high pressure, under the pressure of like doom and disaster, Indians are able to like work together in high intensity as a team and pull something out of the bag at the last minute. It's called jugaad. So are you someone that kind of responds to the high pressure and for your innovation creativity, or do you need a bit more of a
I think jugaad is, I think the nature of things is survival at the end of the day, right? You have to do what you have to do given the constraints that you have. And I think the honest truth is that India is an extremely populated country. It's not a very wealthy country. So people are surviving. They're making do with what they've got. And it does spark incredible creativity. You can pull rabbits out of a hat. I think I've made a fine trade out of trying to pull rabbits out of a hat every time. But this is suboptimal. This doesn't mean that there's not a price to be paid, and it sort of wears and tears over time. You feel sort of like you could go further with a little bit of time. You could go further with a little bit of money. You could go further with collaborating with people who you would like to collaborate with. So jugaad is fantastic and phenomenal, and great things come out of it. But it may be quite lovely to not have to be so jugaadi all the time.
Karin, does in a large kind of pharmaceutical corporate, is there any place for jugaad in your organization? Does it?
You know, I think that in our organization, we are really trying to make sure that while it's a large organization, it also feels like we have very close, small communities all over the world. And there is so much celebration going on in, we are celebrating promotions, getting people together, have had a nice success in some of the research, have a birthday. I truly believe that part of getting people together and supporting each other is actually very strong, and it's very important for getting to the innovation we want. We are fostering. Big companies, ultimately, it's not an anonymous construct. It's actually the people make the companies, and it's like the world, small communities and big communities. So I definitely think there is space for that.
Do you think the research process will change as a result of what's happening with this virus? That things that people, we're hearing now that pharmaceutical companies are making decisions faster. Things that took years are now taking days. Do you think there's going to be a permanent change to the process of how we do medical research?
I think there will be changes, because some of what we are learning is how can we work together from point of view of enrolling patients faster, getting to results faster? What is the critical path? I think there has been a lot of goodwill, all the time, but the sense of urgency teaches us where we can be faster, what is actually possible if we really push for it. I also believe that the other aspect is that we are thinking about COVID-19, and we don't want to be had a second time. So what can we learn? How viruses change, and how can we anticipate better and going forward? Because there has always been a discussion on infectious diseases and what's coming, and that's difficult. But I also believe that we are more pulling together since the whole world is affected.
Thank you. Christoph, do you think education will change as a result of what's happening now? Any permanent changes?
Yes, I think so. And I give you an example. So for the autumn term, here in Cambridge, we call it Michaelmas, right? But it's the fall term. We are intending to be open and have students here, and there will be, safety issues, and maybe the government again says no, but, we are intending to be open. but teaching won't be the same because of all the restrictions. But the key is we will try to use the fall term to reconceptualize the way we teach, you know, from people come to a classroom and I show them some material and I explain and we discuss and, you know, we're bringing a guest speaker to go, you know, there is some material which in a sophisticated preparation is really good for self-study and we gives you some additional material. Then in the classroom, we do group work and discussion, you know, and working and wrestling in small groups. You know, that's what Cambridge stands for anyway. And then we bring in experienced guest speakers in order to test ideas. And I think if we do this right, if we do it strategically, this is going to stay beyond COVID. This will stay in place even when we're all, you know, vaccinated and we're able to be together again, because the result of that will be better than what we had in the past. And if we do this right, we will never go back. And the trick is to use this as a strategic opportunity to move upward rather than to use it as a band-aid to react to a crisis. So I think the forward-looking places will change, and then you know, and then gradually that's going to move through the industry. So I think the answer to the question is yes.
Is yes. All right, Lekha, has anything changed for you?
I was in fact going to ask everybody, what would you like to take from this? Like, what are the changes that you would like to hold on to from the from this sort of event? This is just a question.
Anybody?
For me personally, it's more about what I want for employees, which for me is the future of work, which is more flexibility. I think that's the future of work personally. So I'd like that to continue even after the lockdown.
And Chris, I believe, and Chris, I believe, you know, often talking about this in the context of more distributed work models, that there will be more tailored for people to actually have the opportunity to find where am I the most productive. Some of it will really be in a remote environment, will be much more acceptable for the people who actually can translate that in perhaps even more productivity than in other environments. Again, more tailored to how people are different and people will be productive in different ways. And I think there will be higher tolerance for that.
I've got a quick fire question now for everybody, which is who do you really admire, quick fire round, who do you really admire in either the world of creativity or innovation, and why? Lekha, over to you.
Creativity and innovation, the world of creativity and innovation. I don't know, I was a big fan of Dali once, but he brought an anteater to a party, and I'm not sure if that was the brightest of ideas. You know, I think that it's the unsung heroes, it's the unsung little bits of innovation that I really appreciate. A rubber band, a safety pin, the person who invented Xerox. So it's not the big stars that really get me. It's the little things, it's the tiny little quiet things. What about you guys?
I have to agree. You know, the people who are famous for innovations are to some degree the lucky ones. So the people I admire is the entrepreneurs I see, you know, every year in Cambridge who are incredibly dedicated, where when you look at their motivation, it's actually not just to make money, but to make a change, who are working for no salaries, you know, in makeshift offices, you know, with a very small change of a chance of making it big. And collectively, you know, really big stuff is coming out of it. You know, I think that is really impressive. Anyone did you admire, Karin?
Yeah, so I totally agree with the other panelists said. You know, I can always start and say Leonardo da Vinci, you know, it's easy to go to the past, has this nice combination of scientists and artists. And, you know, some people might sometimes say, oh, this is like everything can it be, but it's actually these peripheral interactions of different disciplines that often bring new innovation. So I always like to have him as a model for that. And then one can go forward, and I'd like the perseverance Marie Curie put into the research she was pursuing. But ultimately, you know, it's really, when I look now and during COVID-19, people who were shut down because of the lockdown, and they had still to figure out how they're doing it. And they found ways under the restrictions now to have their farm shop open and be creative about it. And that creativity and resilience I've seen, my nephew telling me, you know, one just has to think about it differently, and perhaps we can do that. That's what I admire. I think that innovation often is, you know, once we all appreciate it, then it might be already a little bit old. It takes courage to really be early in, and I admire all of the people who do that every day, trying to dare, dreaming big and risking quite a bit.
Well, I've got my last question for you now, really, and it's basically your closing comment, and which is the topic of this debate today, which is can you innovate from your sofa? So very briefly, if you've got any closing comment, you can wrap it up with that. Chris?
Well, my one's pretty easy because I've really been home-based for the last 14 years. So I have been innovating from my sofa. Visibly was born from the sofa. So absolutely you can do. And it's sometimes, in some ways, it's easier to innovate from your sofa. It's more comfortable.
Christoph,
I can innovate my sofa.
I think you can innovate from your sofa. I think you can have ideas from your sofa. You can kick things off, but to make them into innovation, you need many other people. I mean, you may be able to do it from your sofa, but you need to bring other people along, and things have to happen downstream in changing services or products or something else. So there has to be a lot of follow-on activity. Otherwise, it's not going to be an innovation.
Okay. Karin, innovating from your sofa? Possible?
Yes, I think you can have many ideas, but as to what Christoph says, there are many different ways then to follow up on it. These days, one can do a lot from the sofa, and I do think we'll see a lot of food coming out of this time, where a lot of people have been on the sofa innovating, but there will be many other follow-up activities that will be connected to that. Yeah.
I think it really depends on what you're innovating. I think it really depends on what you're innovating. I mean, if you're working on a computer and innovating, then sure, you can do it from the sofa. And if you're trying to build buildings, then maybe you need to go out and build those buildings. So I think it's really subjective to what you're trying to innovate. But of course, you innovate in your head. So you've got full access to that one. So
I'd like, on that note, look, I'd love to thank you all for your incredible contributions and your time. I've really enjoyed this. It's been a lot of fun. And we should do this again sometime anyway, perhaps in a face-to-face environment sometime. So look, thanks you all again. And next week we'll be back with another kind of, in the third of our series of these kind of o2h ChaiTime lockdown discussions. Craig Townsend will be looking at the technology journey from startup to exit. So we look forward to seeing you all next week, and thank you all again. Good night.
Thank you, Prashant.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Love to see you.
Lovely to meet you guys.
Nice to meet you.
Nice meeting you.
Bye-bye. Stay safe.
See you.
Bye.
Bye.
Stay safe.